Hello everybody, Mike here, Game from Scratch. Welcome back to our ongoing Godot 3 game engine tutorial series. Today we're going to be checking out user interface development. Maybe not the sexiest of subjects, but you'll be shocked at how capable Godot 3 is at this stuff. In fact, the entirety of Godot 3 is built using its own built-in UI functionality, so you can do a lot with it. Before we continue, just a quick reminder, there's actually a book being developed that goes along with this series. Hopefully it'll be up for pre-sale very soon, but if you are interested in checking it out a bit early, I am doing preview releases of each chapter as they're developed for patron backers. I will throw links to that down below. All right, without further ado, let's jump right in. And here is Godot. Obviously, we're going to be working in 2D on this one. I'm just going to go ahead and create a simple scene, have a root node like I always do, and then just go ahead and save it as, I don't know, UI demo. That sounds good. All right. And now we're going to basically go ahead and start showing you some of the UI functionality in Godot 3. We're going to cover quite a bit here, actually. We're not going to go through all of the controls. There's dozens and dozens of them. That would take way too much time. And they all perform somewhat similarly. So we're going to show you the basics of how they work. Then we're going to show you how to customize them, how to create themes. We're going to move on to using dialogs and something else I forgot. We'll leave that one as a spoiler for when we get to it. But we're going to be covering a lot of subjects here. So first off, let's look at a simple control. Now this entirety is built over top of all of the Godot features we know and love already. So it lends itself really nice to UI development. That means things like, everything's node-based. The node hierarchies carry over. So if you position a node inside of another node, it inherits all that stuff. It uses the signal stuff for handling events, as we'll see in a second. So let's start off and make ourselves a simple control. So we come in here, you look, there's control under canvas item. And then we go on down, we will see there's a bunch of them. Things like text editor. There's this button class with various different kinds of buttons. There's graphs. There's item lists, etc. So you've got a lot of UI control functionality to work with. And what we're going to start with is the faithful button. Now I'm just going to go ahead and create a normal button. But as you can see, there are a number of different kinds of buttons that you can create. So we'll create a simple button. You'll notice it created there up on the screen. We'll just size that guy out like so. One of the things you're going to obviously want to change on your button is the text that the button displays. And we'll go with, hello, oh no, I'll go with click me. So I type that, and there you see the text is centered in the middle of the button. Now we want to wire the button up to actually do something. So for doing that, we're going to need a script. Did I attach it to the node or did I attach it to the root? I'll attach it to the button this time. So right-click your button, go ahead and basically just create a new script. So attach script. Button.gd sounds fine with me. All right, so here we are. We have a script attached to our node. Let's head on back over here. So we have our button right here. To wire things up, we use the existing event system. So click the node. So our node is selected. Right, so not sure what just happened there. And what we want to do is come down and wire up the event pressed. So you see there's also a forward button down, which is when you click it, and when you button up for when you release it. There's two separate things. So we just basically want to combine all of that into a single action, which is pressed. And we'll wire that up into button like so. It's on button pressed. I'm fine with that. And then go ahead and connect it. So you see it created a function for us. Get rid of everything else. And we're not going to do a whole lot with it. Let's just go ahead and, so you notice we've got a number of properties, one of which we're going to use is text, and then we're just going to say clicked. So when you press the button, it just changes its text to click. So that is how easy it is to handle events attached to UI components. And we'll go ahead and run that out now. There is our button. We press it. It is changed to click. So wiring up events to controls is really that simple, and they almost all work along the same premise. Now let's play around a little bit with the style of a button. So let's go back to our button over here, and we'll look in the inspector, and you'll see here there's a number of things we can set with the button. We can make it a flat button. We can align the text differently inside of it. We could add an icon if we wish, like a graphic that goes along with it. We could disable the button. We could tell if it was, we could set it to pressed on our own if we wanted. We can change things out there. But what we're interested in this particular time is down here, and we're going to apply a custom style to it. You may also be wondering, how can I change the font on this guy? Well, we'll get to that later on, but you could also set it here in custom fonts. We'll cover fonts later on in this actual chapter, or whatever we want to call this. So what I'm going to do basically is set it up so that when you hover over this guy, a custom style is applied. So we're going to change the background color to red? Yeah, we'll go with red. So what we're going to do is basically come down here, go to custom styles, we'll click it on for hover, right click beside it, and we'll say new style box flat. And then with that selected, once again, go back in and click edit. And now we're in the style box color. We're going to go here and wire that up to red. So that's all you really need to do to apply a custom style to it. And you notice there were a lot of different options in there. So we can see we can change the border radius, if there's a shadow, if it's anti-alias, the margins around it, etc. So you can tweak a lot of the look and feel of every control via these custom styles. And now that that's done, if we go ahead and run this code, we set that up on hover, so when we hover over, you'll see we switch to red. So it's really that simple to theme your, or to stylize an individual control. We can also do this using code. But first, before I move on, I wanted to show you one other thing. So when I actually have that button selected and we are in the style for it, so right down here, we go into edit mode. Notice down here there is a new window box called style box. It's going to be named based off of whatever type you're currently in. But you can actually see a preview of the current style you're working with. So if I instead, went with a different color, you can see the work that you're creating when you're customizing your controls previewed down here under a custom named window that will show up down in this panel. So it makes it handy so that when you're trying to decide if what you're doing looks good or not, you don't have to run your code to see it. You can actually see it previewed down here in real time. Okay, so now let's get back to that code way. So let's go on back into our button. Now we'll go to our script. All right, now what I want to do is show you how you would process the exact same thing just programmatically. So there's actually a function called on mouse button enter. We can wire it up here actually. So let's go back. Node wired. Scroll down. It's one of the inherited ones. Mouse entered. This is when your mouse is basically hovering over for the first time over your control. Go ahead, wire that up. We'll go into our button and connect that guy up. And here what we'll do is we're going to be fighting with our style box, but self.add color override, and there's a series of override functions. Basically this is the same thing as going into the control, and you can see there's actually even code preview for what we're overriding here. So we're going to do font color hover, and in that case when we do it, we'll make it black. And that will do the exact same thing that our other code did. Now they're going to fight each other. I don't know who would win. So I'm going to go ahead and take that style off so we can demonstrate the code version instead. So let's just go down here, we'll clear you out, and we shall run thee. And now when we hover over, the color changes, like so. So that is basically how you can customize and use an individual control. Now, when you're trying to get a look and feel across all of the controls in your application, it often makes sense to go ahead and actually create a theme. This is just basically a set of defaults for all of the different controls within your application if you wish, depending on how you apply it. I'll show you that in a second. Excuse me. So what we're going to do now is create a theme. Go down to Inspector, click the little guy right here. This creates a new resource, and what we want to create, I bet you can guess this one, is a theme. So we created a new theme like so. It should show up down here. Okay, one second. All right, and now what you're actually interested in isn't anything really over here, it's down here. So you'll notice there's now a theme panel and an edit theme option. Let me expand that up a little. Where's the divider? There it is. Expand this guy up a little bit, and you see what you've got here is all of the various different controls that are available to be themed. And what we want to do is add an item. So go edit theme, add item like this. And now you're going to have to, basically, you pick the controls to theme, the item on the control to theme, and then the value for it. So let's go ahead and show you that in action. So first thing we want to do, click here, and then a list of every single themable control is shown. What we want is button. Then, and okay, this is a little weird because it's out of order. You need to then come down to the bottom one and pick the item you want to theme. So you could theme the font, the style, the color, the constant. We'll stick with the color theme. So we're going to go here and go to color. And then here, now with the other two selected, you've got the choices under color. So what we're going to do here is font color, I think. I want to stay consistent to the book. So what did I do there? Yeah, font color. All right, so go ahead and add that in. So now we have a font color option available for our theme. And you will notice that over here. So now there is a new section based off the button we just added, colors, font color. So now this is exposed. We can come on in here to the editor, We can pick whichever color we want our text to be now, like so. And then finally, let's save our theme. So save that guy as my theme dot theme, like so. And maybe I should spell that right. Really doesn't matter, but all right. So we saved that .theme file. So it is now over here in our project, as you can see. We head on back over to our button over here. So instead of a custom style like so, we go to the theme category instead, and we pick our theme. And you'll notice immediately the button is now colored. Now the cool thing about this theme is we can actually have applied this to a parent control and it will propagate down to all of the children. But this enables you to set all of your config settings in a single source in a single file using a visual editor like we just saw, and then you can apply it to your entire UI consistently. But of course, any particular one you can override it using custom styles, custom themes, custom colors, etc., or using code like we just showed you a minute ago. So the theming ability in Godot is actually quite powerful. It's pretty extensive in what you can do. And in fact, we could also have done that entire bit in code. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to clear that theme out. So you see here, we have nothing going on. Let's once again switch back to our script here, implement the ready function, override. And now we're going to do the exact same thing we just did in creating that theme, but we're going to do it programmatically. So we're going to create a new theme called myTheme equals theme.new. And then we can go ahead and myTheme.setColor, and then the type of color, like so. We're setting the font color, the control to set it on, so the control is the type button, and then the color to set it, which is red. There you go. And then we just go ahead, so the button dot set theme, my theme. This is exactly the same as the process we went through to go over here and basically create a new theme, go down here, set, add items to it, etc. This is the code-based version of it. The only thing is it will only apply when you run your code as opposed to in the editor. So if I save this guy, we'll go back to editor, so you'll see our button is white. When I run it, our button will be themed programmatically to red, green, blue. Okay, sorry, that wasn't red, that was blue. So anyways, it programmatically created it as blue. So pretty cool stuff. You can do everything we're doing basically with the editor. You could also do it with code. Now, next up, we're going to look at UI containers. When you're dealing with controls, basically what you often want to do is group them together. This is handy for, aligning them to one side of the page or another, for moving them all at once, for making things resizable, etc. So we're going to take a look now at the control options or the container options that are available in Godot. And there's actually quite a few of them. We go back up here to the node list. So, let me just get rid of our button. So come back here, create a new node. We'll go down into control, and what you're looking for is container, and here are all your various different containers. So you can see there are quite a few of them, and what they are basically is corresponded in their name. So you see here, HBox container it takes all of its child nodes and holds them in a horizontal box pattern. Ditto for vertical boxes. This one holds them in a grid pattern, so you set a number of rows, and then every subsequent child that's added to it is added in a grid layout. If you've ever worked with HTML5 table layouts, you'll probably be pretty comfortable with all of these. And then we've got a couple of others, like panel here. This one's pretty simple. It just basically wraps the selected controls in a panel. And then we've got some predefined ones, like a color picker, which we've used many times for selecting a color. It's just a pre-built control for us. So let's jump in and take a look at some container controls. And in this particular case, I'm not actually going to be creating a real UI. I'm just going to show you how a potential layout could work. So we're going to start first off with a center container. And all this container does is draws all of its children relative to its center point. So now we're going to, whatever we put inside of here is going to align accordingly. And now mostly it's a matter, let's get rid of some of this space. Now it's just a matter of nesting a bunch of controls inside of other controls. So what we're going to do is do a top level container. So add a child to that top container as a H splitter, or this guy right here. And this allows you to split controls horizontally. And then what we're going to do is nest controls underneath this control. So the top one we're going to put everything on each side in a panel container. Now a panel container is a very straightforward control. It literally just draws a rectangle around the contained So that's going to be a rectangle on one side, and then we're going to go ahead and add another child, and we'll call this, it's also a panel container, like so. So we have left and right. Here, I'll actually name them. Left panel, right panel. Okay, so we now have options. Now there's nothing actually in any of these panels, so let's go ahead. We'll make this one very simple, and we'll add a child to it, and we'll just make a color picker in it. We've used color picker a number of times already. It's a predefined control. See, you got all of that stuff that's in it, but you'll see what's going on here. So we have our split container. Our splitter is right here, so you could put in some logic to allow you to resize between the two windows. Sort of like this guy right here is a splitter container right there, and this is a set of controls on one side, and this is a set of controls on the opposite. So we got our one right-hand side defined. Now let's go to our left and make this guy somewhat more complicated. So we're going to start off first by stacking a bunch of vertical controls. So that's where that V box comes in. And basically, this is just a vertical 1D grid of controls at this point in time. So any children added are added vertically to each other in a box format. So let's add a child. Button. We've seen button already. Put some text on it so it's actually rendered on screen. Button 1. So there you see it is being orientated vertically within this child. So let's go ahead and add another type, something we haven't used yet. Let's make a menu button. Menu button. And this is button 2. And then we're going to go ahead and create a checkbox, like so. And we will call the checkbox check me. So you see, we've got 3 controls, and they're all orientated vertically within this hierarchy of controls inside of our left panel. So the panel, again, just draws the outline around it. The vertical box container orientates all of its children vertically, and we can actually nest containers within containers. So what now we're going to do is create a horizontal one, an HBox container, and that's now a child within our hierarchy of controls, and then we just start adding children to it. So for example, label, we'll create one label, left. And what I'm going to do is create a separator, because I'm going to create another label. Separator is just a visual separator and a word I can't spell. So vSeparator, so it will separate the 2 controls that's beside it in the hierarchy. So the next one up, we will create another label child, like so, and we will call this one right. And here you can see what happened. So we've got our vertical arrangement of controls. Inside it, we have a horizontal arrangement of controls. And you can see they are aligned left and right. And speaking of alignment, we come back here to the horizontal controls. You can determine how things are set up and controlled here. So for example, I could do alignment center, and there you will see all of the child controls pop and automatically inherit. And now when I went back to our theme earlier, if I should still actually have it defined. So I'm going to go to this top level control here, and theme. Okay, drag and drop themes. And you notice all of the child buttons immediately updated. So there's the power of themes. So the entire hierarchy of nodes within will have that theme applied to them. So the UI functionality inside of Godot is pretty staggeringly powerful and really honestly quite simple. In a lot of ways, if you ever did any HTML5 layout using tables, it's exactly the same process, but you're just using specialized grids within that all have their own specific functionality. But you can create some pretty powerful layouts in a very, very simple manner using Godot. Next up, we're going to talk about something quite simple, really, so I'm just going to go ahead and say goodbye to all of you, is dialogs. And you're going to use dialogs maybe not so often in games unless an error occurs, but definitely in tools. And dialogs are literally just windows that can be popped up on screen. You've got some defined dialogs, you've got some that aren't. So let's go ahead and look at dialogs now. So go ahead in here, search for a dialog, and you will see they are inherited from control under the class pop-up. And you've got window dialog, accept dialog, confirmation dialog, file dialog, and pop-up dialog. So let's say we needed to load a file. So let's go ahead and create a file dialog, like so. And while we're designing it, there's a little guy here to the side. So one of the things about a dialog is you generally don't see it until you've actually displayed it. But you can actually make it visible by clicking right there, and you can also position it within your scene right there. So you see it's a predefined, how do I find and go about get a file kind of dialog. Now, dialog has a lot of properties depending on the kind of dialog you're dealing with. So file dialog is one of the more complicated ones. And you can see you can set a bunch of values here, such as, the starting path to open in, show hidden directories, filters. These are things like star.star for everything, star.png, star.jpg, etc. So this will limit the type of files it can have. We've got mode. This one's probably the most important. So this allows you to say this is a save dialog or an open dialog or an open many dialog or open folder dialog, etc. So let's say we're going to open up a single file with this guy. So we'd set that guy to open one. For example, then we got a bunch of things we inherited from other dialog classes. So, for example, if we don't want them to be able to resize it, we can click that guy and it becomes a static dialog. And yeah. Now let's actually jump in and show some code. Yeah. So that warning is just basically saying they're hidden by default, and this is just showing it in the editor, which is useful because we want to be able to see it on screen. But we can turn that off and that error will go away. So what we now want to do is go ahead, attach a script to this guy. Actually, no, I'm going to attach the script to the parent. Right, this guy, because often you wouldn't show a dialog using its own code. You would show a dialog from the parent class. So we'll go ahead and attach a script here. And simply all we're going to do is on ready, we'll show that dialog. So first off, let's get the dialog and show it. Now here you've got a bunch of different options. Show could just show it using default settings. What we're going to do in this case is actually show modal. And what show modal does is causes it to be the topmost window. So you can't really do anything else with your application. Your entire UI behind it should be shut down. And also that should have not let me focus under. So I'm not sure why it let me do that. That shouldn't have happened. 1 second. Okay, well I think that behavior might actually be a bit of a bug. But anyways, you can see here, this causes the dialog to be displayed. You can then select a file, etc. We can also now, what we're going to do when the file is selected, well, we can actually handle that. If you come down here, so node, you'll see there are actual signals attached. So here we can say, okay, when the file is actually selected, fire off this event. And you can see there's one for multiple files selected or directory selected. So we're going to file selected, wire it up in our parent because it's got the script attached. And here we will just go ahead and dump out some debug information. So we're just going to say print file selected at plus, and then path is being passed into us like that. Save that out, run our code. So here you see your file dialog is selected. I have no files in this folder. All right, let's go up a directory. So we'll select button.gd, and there you see file selected at, and then that location. So yeah, dialogs are a fairly straightforward process here. And you're not often going to want to use a dialog because it's a very jarring way of asking for information. So more often this is if you need to force them to pick out a file or an error occurred that you can't recover from, etc. That's often when you would use a dialog in an actual game. Let's look at a different example now. So I'm just going to go ahead, change this back to our default code because we'll reuse it in a second. But let's get rid of our file dialog and instead do a confirmation dialog. Confirmation dialog. This is the kind of dialog you would use for basically just spitting some text up for the user to see and then prompting them if they're okay with that or if they want to cancel. So here I'll actually show you it. So you see here, you put your text up to display to them. So let's open up the accept dialog, we'll set our text here. Like so. So you see, you've got the prompt, an OK, and a cancel button. It's not as obvious how you actually use that cancel button, so let's take a look at that in code now instead. So we're going to, our dialog is changed, let's switch back to our code. To access that cancel button, we instead do like that. You call it via get cancel. This will get a handle to that cancel button on there. And now we could wire up an event to it. So we're going to wire up to the pressed event on that canceled button to ourself, and we'll call the method on cancel. And did I do enough? Yes, I did. All right, so we'll do function on cancel. Like so. So now run that code. Oh, wait. I need to actually display the dialog. Ooh. Alright, so we've got it wired up, and confirmation dialog dot show. Here we'll actually do dot show on top. Maybe that's why modal wasn't working the way it was supposed to. So this should be the topmost. I don't know why they're naming it the same as modal then. That's confusing. Anyways, here, we'll run it out. Show on top, non-existent function. Okay, let's go back to what we know. Show modal, run that out, create our dialog. Our dialog is being shown in modal form this time. Maybe it's that true. Maybe I missed the true before. Maybe that was my mistake. All right, so here is proper modal behavior. I can't select anything in the background of our window while the modal dialog is being displayed. So that's exactly what we wanted to see. Right now, OK doesn't actually do anything, but cancel is wired. So you see it is now functionally calling that canceled on us. Now, if we go back to the confirmation for the actual button signal, you have a confirmed button. So if we want to handle confirmed, we could have just simply done it there. So you can wire that one up. Handling confirmed is very straightforward. Literally, there's an event for it. That's that cancel button for some reason. There's no uncanceled event, so you have to manually connect to it like this. But as you see, showing dialogs, creating dialogs is a pretty simple process, pretty straightforward. And just like for all of these other examples, let me show you how you can do this entire process in code. So we'll get rid of that guy, delete it out, go back here, we'll switch back to our code. Let's get rid of everything right here. And instead what we're going to do is create a dialog. We'll make it an accept dialog. So create one, and then diag.get label. Put the text we're going to display, like so. I'm not going to bother wiring up the OK or cancel button. You know how to do that at this point. So let's add this as a child to our node. Diag, like so. And finally, diag dot. Here we'll do a pop-up centered. Slightly different way of doing things. This will display the pop-up movable style, but it will be centered to our parent window. And let's save that and run our code and fix my error. Get label. Oh, missed a part. Dot text. So get label returns a reference to the label control embedded within the accept dialog, but we're actually modifying the text of it. That was just a typo on my behalf. And we run that, and I did something else stupid. Dot get label func. Did you mean get label? So I forgot to call it that time. Whew. All right, I'm done screwing up my single line of code. We run it. Diag dot get label dot text. Oh geez, I'm being so stupid. All right. I'm mixing up properties and functions left, right, and center here. I'm going to read this a couple times to make sure I'm not being an idiot. Shouldn't be, in theory. That's all I need to do. Now let's run it. There you go. Center to the screen, but movable. Click OK, out, and done. So again, you would have to wire up the OK handler in code to actually have it do what you wanted to do, but it is the exact same process we just went through a second ago. So that's dialogs. Pretty cool stuff. Now, finally, we're just going to end off with fonts. Now, fonts are pretty important to a good UI. And there are two kinds of fonts built into the Godot game engine. There's bitmap fonts and dynamic fonts. Now, dynamic fonts are generated from a TTF file. Bitmap fonts are generated from a FNT file that is paired with a bitmap. Now, you'd often use a program. There's a program available called, what's it called? BM font. It's freely available at angelcode.com, and you basically import a TTF font and it creates the requisite files for you. To be honest, there's almost no reason anymore to use a bitmap font, and the support for it in Godot has been stripped back with the Godot 3, so I'm going to focus mostly on dynamic fonts. Now, in order to use dynamic font, you actually need to have a TTF file of some sort. So I'm just going to go ahead into, I think it's in here, books, Godot 3, projects, UI chapter. And here is a TTF font I downloaded off of the interwebs. We just literally drop it into our folder. Well, in theory, that's what we do. Drag and drop is not working in that case, so instead we'll just show it in the file manager. So there is our one project. There is our font. I'll just control click, drag it over. So it is now in our project. And there you see it has now shown up. It imports as a TTF, so there's no real settings to have to do there. So now we have a font we are ready to go ahead and use. Now, you could use a font at the control level on a one-by-one basis. You could do it as a theme, etc. We're going to do it the simplest way possible. We're going to just basically do a custom override on a label. So go ahead, create a label like this guy, and we will position it on screen so we can see it. Let's get some text in this guy. So this is my font, like so. Let's make it visible. And now what we want to do is apply a font to it. So come on down here, you see custom fonts, like so. And there's an option down here, and you got two options. You got a new bitmap font or a new dynamic font. We're going to create a new dynamic font. Go into that again and click edit. Like so, and settings, extra settings, and font. It's font, the one that you're interested in. There's this font data category here. We are just going to take our TTF file over here and drop it in the category. The cool thing is you can actually do fallback fonts as well. So if the font isn't located or doesn't work on the given system, you can have it fall back to another font. And I think by default it will fall back to the built-in font if you don't provide one. So that's kind of cool. If for some reason on the platform you deploy to, the font you selected doesn't work, you have fallback options there. All right, so we just added our font, but you'll notice our text is not looking so great. Well, that's because we need to set a size. So let's do a size, make this 34 points, and there you see immediately it is there. Now the cool thing with a dynamic font as opposed to a bitmap font, with a bitmap font you bake the size into it when you create your sprite sheet. So it's very not that flexible. Now the advantage of a bitmap font or a dynamic font is load slightly better, load slightly faster, which is incredibly marginal in this day and age, and potentially displays faster, but I have to imagine that Godot internally is actually caching this as we're generating it into a bitmap file anyways. So I don't think there'd be a performance advantage over one over the other anyway. So I would just recommend using dynamic fonts in general, especially because you can't create a font using a bitmap font in any way other than code, which, you know, as of Godot 3 anyways. So you saw here we set the point size of our font right there. And the cool thing with the dynamic font, and why it gets its name, is we can choose. That's way too big. Coincidentally, the dragging aspect of Godot 3 controls is being fixed in the next release, which is kind of cool. But as you saw, we can just jump the size up, or we can do the exact opposite and make things really tiny. Let's go on back to 32 where we started out. Now, another option you might want to be interested in here is use filter. This is basically going to anti-alias your font. If you are going for a pixelated look and you brought in a pixelated font, you probably want to turn this off. Otherwise, you probably want to leave it on. You can also add some spacing into the font. So let's look at this one. For example, the space at the very top, we could add 3 pixels and you'll move it down accordingly. Do the same thing for the bottom, which isn't going to work in this particular case, and for each character, so the spacing between them, and you'll see the end result. So that is fonts. Now, when I did the book, I actually covered bitmap fonts, and you know, in the sake of keeping this video a little brief, I'm not going to bother. I just don't think it's worthwhile to use them. So if you do have an edge case, there is another option out there, but it's just confusing for most people. So for most people, just stick to a dynamic font. Now, once again, once you've created your font, you can actually use it in any theme you want. So generally, you would create the font at the theme level instead of having to override it on a control-by-control basis. But as you saw, right here, we can quite easily override the font controls like that by applying a custom font in. And that is it. That is UI development in the Godot game engine. We covered the basics of a lot of stuff, but you should be able to extrapolate how to use just about everything else out from what we covered here. So if you want to use more advanced fonts with advanced styling, etc., you'll use rich text label instead of this label. There's other control options such as the grid that we didn't get into, but really they're kind of just derivatives of everything we just did. So I don't want to make this video excessively long to cover stuff that I think you'll be able to figure out on your own at this point on. So you saw the functionality, the theming, the styling previews, the font capabilities, the control container layouts, the dialogs, etc. There is a very robust UI system built into Godot, and it's pretty easy to use. So one of the things about this is it actually makes Godot pretty useful for creating your own game tools, which you can use to create and work on an actual Godot game that you're working on. I'm actually seeing there's some stuff going on right now. Someone's creating a terrain editor. Someone's creating a PBR-based painter using Godot UI, and Godot functionality, but it's a standalone application. So if you want to use Godot to create tools, this UI functionality is actually really quite solid. And as you can see, if you look around the Godot interface, it's using all of this stuff itself. So pretty powerful stuff there built into Godot. I hope you found that useful. Of course, if you did, click like and all that other stuff. And I will talk to you all later. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.